Hi, 7th graders. We are going to be talking about how to convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. So, kind of based off of what we were talking about yesterday. Again, remember when we talk about percents, percent literally means per 100 or out of 100. So here I have a little triangle. Fractions, decimals, and percents are all related. And I have some different kind of arrows. The purple arrows are going from left to right, or I guess clockwise around. And then the green arrows are going counterclockwise. So you can use this diagram if you needed to convert from a fraction to a percent, for example. Then you're going to follow this purple line and read this purple text here as a reminder of how you could possibly do that. If you wanted to go from a decimal to a percent, then you would be following this green arrow. So then you'd be moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So this little diagram just kind of has a lot of information in it. And we might refer to it as we go through some different examples here. But I'm not going to sit and read everything to you right now. So what we're going to start with is just here we have, we're going to be looking at some visuals as well as fractions, decimals, and percents. And we're really going to focus in on simplifying those fractions as well. So it says complete the missing equivalent values. So I'm given that I'm talking about a percent that's 65%. So I'm actually going to start with our picture first. All right, we have a 10 by 10 grid, which means there's 100 squares here. And we know that 65% means 65 per 100. And so that means out of these 100, that's a little bit better. Out of these 100 squares, we're going to have 65 of them that are going to be shaded. So my coloring in here is not going to be perfect. But there's my 60. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so I have 65 of those shaded. And then now we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at our fraction and our decimal equivalent values for 65%. So again, we know that 65% means 65 per 100. So if I think of 65 out of 100, but again, we're focusing on that simplifying the fractions. So what I notice when I see 65 out of 100 is that 65 ends in a 5 and 100 ends in a 0. I know that numbers that end in 5 and 0 are both divisible by 5. So we're going to divide these both by 5. Sometimes you might see the greatest common factor right away. Sometimes you might not. All right. But right now I know that I can divide by 5. So 65 divided by 5 is going to give me 13. 100 divided by 5 is going to give me 20. So I'm going to end up with a fraction of 13/20. All right. To get that decimal form, we could do a couple of things. We could either use our percent, and we could use what we learned yesterday, that we can move our decimal 2 places to the left. I could use this fraction, the starting fraction of 65 hundredths, and I might realize, oh, well, my denominator has 2 zeros, so I'm going to have 2 places after my decimal, and that would give me the 65 hundredths that way. We could also use this fraction, the 13/20. You could do this with the 65 hundredths too, but I could divide the numerator by the denominator, so top to bottom. And when you do that, then you would get 0.65 as well. So we're going to do a couple of just different conversions between some different types of numbers, and then we're going to focus on some more visuals here. So writing 140% as a decimal, all right? When I go from a percent to a decimal, so if I look at my chart, percent to a decimal, I'm moving this way. So I'm going to look at this purple arrow. It says move the decimal 2 places to the left. So 140%. Now I don't see a decimal, which means my decimal is behind that 0. So I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the left, and I actually end up getting 1.4. All right. The reason we end up with a whole number in front of that decimal is because we have a percent that's over 100%. All right, same thing here, right? 4.5% as a decimal. This time I see the decimal, all right? It's starting right there between the 4 and the 5. So I'm going to start there and move it 2 places to the left. All right, now when I move it 1 place, I'm out of numbers, so I'm going to have to move it a second time, and then I'm going to have to add a 0 as a placeholder. So So I end up with 0.045 or 45 thousandths. Writing 3/8 as a percent. There's a couple of different ways. So if I look at fraction to percent, okay, it says find an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, and you can set up a proportion to do this. So, and what I love about fractions, decimals, and percents is if you wanted to make the 3/8 into a decimal first and then convert the decimal to the percent, you could do that as well. But right now we are just going to focus on, I have 3/8 and I'm going to set up a proportion. Remember, an equation stating that two ratios are equal. And I want to figure out, okay, 3/8 is equal to what out of 100? Okay. And so then if I do this, again, there's a couple of different ways to solve a proportion, but I know that 3 times 100 is going to equal the same thing as 8 times x. So 300 is equal to 8x. And if I take 300 and divide it by 8, that will tell me what my x is, which is going to end up being 37.5. Now, because I want it as a percent, I have one extra step. Anytime we're talking about a percent, we need to make sure our percent sign is on our answer. So 37.5, and then we draw that percent sign. And then write 9/25 as a decimal. So here I'm going from a fraction to a decimal. So I'm going to follow this green arrow. It says divide the numerator by the denominator. Again, there are multiple ways. We could figure this out as a percent first and then make the percent into a decimal. Or if I divide 9 by 25, if you're using your calculator, you're going to read it top to bottom and type it in that order. 9 divided by 25. So the 9 goes in first. Or if I was going to do some hand division, which I'm just going to do really quickly here, 9 divided by 25 like that. 25 will not go into 9, so I'm going to put my decimal in a 0. I know 25 goes into 93 times, which gives me 75. So you have 15 left over. I'm going to drop down a 0. 25 is going to go to 150 6 times, which gives me 150. So this would be 0.36. All right, we're going to look at some examples that are comparing visuals with fractions, decimals, and percents. So on this first example, I actually have my simplified fraction, 17/25, and I want to find the equivalent decimal, percent, and then a visual to help me with that. So if I was going to make this into the 17/25, we could either divide 17 divided by 25, so read it top to bottom like that. I also know that 25 evenly goes into 100, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set up that proportion. And so 25 times 4 will give me 100, so if I do 17 times 4, that's going to give me 68. So 17/25 is equivalent to 68 hundredths, which now I know that's 68%, which I also know that's 0.68. And then I could shade in 68 of these because this is a 100s grid. So there's my 60, and then I can shade in another 8. All right, if we look at this next example, we actually have the visual first. So when I look at this visual, I have 3 shaded, 3 pieces out of a total of 8. All right, and they're all equivalent, equally split pieces. So 3/8 is that fraction. And we actually just did this, but we did this exact same problem over here on number 3. So 3/8 as a percent, we just found out is 37.5%. If you need help on how to do that, look back over here. And then we could use our percent to figure out our decimal. So I'm going to move that decimal 2 places to the left, which is going to give me 0.375. We could also get the decimal from the fraction by dividing 3 divided by 8. All right, here's another example. We have the picture this time. So if I look at how many total pieces I have 20. So I know my fraction is going to be out of 20. And if I look at how many are shaded there, I have 15 shaded. So 15/20. We want to simplify that. So 15 and 20. Both have a common factor of 5. So it's going to simplify to 3/4. To get my decimal, I could either do 3 divided by 4. I could do 15 divided by 20. I could set 15/20 equal to something over 100 and get a percent and then write that as a decimal. There's a lot of different ways you could do it. In this case, if we, actually, I'll just use the 3/4 and get my percent. So percent means per 100. So I'm trying to figure out 3 out of 4 would be equal to what out of 100. And then when we do that, 4 times 25 is going to give me 100. So 3 times 25 is going to give me 75%, which is going to equal 0.75. This one here, I have my decimal. To go from a decimal to a percent, I'm going to move 2 places to the right. So this would be 8%. Again, remember when you're finding a percent, you need that percent sign. And then fraction, 8% would be 8 out of 100. When I look at 8 and 100, I notice that they're both even, so I could start by dividing by 2. I also happen to notice that 4 will be a common factor of both of those numbers as well. So 4 will go into 8 twice, and 4 goes into 125 times. So my simplified fractions is 2/25. And then for the picture, because we have 100 squares, I'm going to shade in 8 because of that 8%. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and try these mild, medium, and spicy on your own, but I will post the answer key on Google Classroom. Have a great day.